on Charlotte Bronte in particular. There's a freshness to his antipathy that even several decades after Lewis's death in 1878 speaks of something more than a mere distaste for Lewis's views, but his comments seem to me indicative in a number of ways of views current in subsequent scholarship. In his address to what must have been the 12th AGM of the Bronte Society, Chesterton accuses Lewes of doing nothing but harm. He was a man who represented the very worst elements in mid-Victorian England, a man for which the word prig was invented, who despite his great intellect had a peculiar kind of stupidity and insensibility. George Henry Lewes, according to Chesterton, was sent into the world either at the instigation of God or the devil to perform one particular task, to destroy the talent of George Eliot. Oh. Yeah. In Chesterton's estimation, he accomplished that work with considerable success. Moreover, and this again is Chesterton, he attempted to destroy in the same way the genius of Charlotte Bronte. This too, Chesterton seems to have felt Lewes had gone some way in accomplishing. Diagnosing what he considered to be the failure of Shirley and Villette, Chesterton ascribes the waning of Bronte's storytelling verve to Lewis's criticism. Quote, "She was destroyed and broken in that one definite attempt she made to create that which ought to have been created in the 19th century, the high, passionate, and romantic novel." Unquote. The real culprit here for Chesterton, it would seem, is the kind of realism that Lewes espoused for the novel generally, and which he specifically recommended to Bronte in his letters and reviews. A realism which is characterized by Chesterton thus. A realism was a condition in which a person said, "I brought all these sticks and straws together in order to prove permanent human philosophy. And now I've grown fonder of the sticks and straws than of the philosophy which I intended to prove. I have collected all this odious rubbish and have extracted from my morbid diaries all these gloomy and in many cases disgusting episodes in order to assert some central idea of human life. And now I've forgotten what the idea is. So here are the sticks and straws." Now this is a witty caricature of a certain kind of realism, but one more appropriate, I think, to the early 20th century realists who were Chesterton's contemporaries, or to Émile Zola, than it is to, say, Middlemarch or Villette. It is certainly a gross misrepresentation of Lewis's aesthetic principles, which is his insistence on dramatic presentation, psychological characterization, and economy of means to artistic end, in many ways prefigure those of Henry James. Still, Chesterton's remarks reflect the lively discussion that has swirled around Lewis's and Bronte's correspondence, and Lewis's now famous reviews of Jane Eyre and Shirley, since Elizabeth Gaskell gave them such prominence in her life of Charlotte Bronte. The tone of Chesterton's remarks also gives us some of the flavor of the contentious and robust literary world of 19th century Britain, to which Chesterton was the belated heir, and is also fairly typical, though slightly more vitriolic in Chesterton's case, of the advocacy of authors' reputations within single-author literary societies, both then and now. Lewes has not surprisingly earned a place in Bronte history and biography as something of a villain. Juliet Barker has some very sharp words to say about him in her life of the Brontes, and even the mild-mannered Gaskell, who owed him very much, I should say, for the surrender of the 9 letters that Charlotte wrote to him, takes him to task for his tactless exposure of Charlotte's identity as a female author. On the other hand, Lewes' devotees, largely culled from those whose primary literary allegiance is to George Eliot, have argued strongly on his behalf, sometimes ironically on the very same grounds upon which he has been attacked, his emphasis on realistic representation. In an article by Franklin Gary in the Publications of the Modern Language Society of 1936, Gary argues at length that Lewis's criticism of Bronte's work was not only judicious but also instrumental in taming her tendency toward melodrama and awakening her to her own limitations. Declaring Shirley a failure along the same lines that Lewes did, and Chesterton for that matter, and calling Villette her masterpiece, Gary concludes, "It has seemed to me that going through her letters and novels, that the criticism which she received from him made her more acutely aware of of the necessity of self-criticism in her writings made her artistically more self-conscious in a way that no other criticism did. It's not my intention to enter the fray here on one side or the other, but instead to present, or for some of you to review, the nature of the interchange between these two fascinating figures, with an eye to what we might discover about Bronte's views of her own art. For this is really what seems most crucially of interest in these letters. Besides offering another view of Bronte's epistolary personality, that was the end of that sentence, excuse me, besides offering another view of Bronte's epistolary personality, if Lewes accomplished anything substantive in the exchange, it was to provoke Charlotte into defending her own judgment and the grounds of her novelistic practice. I would like to say about the controversy, however, and in particular about the positions staked out in their most extreme form by Chesterton and Gary, that these men seem far too easily convinced that Bronte was influenced in such decisive ways in the pursuit of her own artistic aims, whether she was broken, as Chesterton claims, or was inspired to mature greatness, as does Gary.